Hello, my name is Finn Crooks. I use she and her or they and them pronouns. I work for Let's Grow Kids as the Southern Vermont regional organizer in Windham and Windsor County. Really excited to be here with my buddy Sam. I'll let him tell you who he is.
Hey everybody, Sam Donnelly. I'm the legislative coordinator for Let's Grow Kids. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm from Burlington.
Amazing. We're going to tell you a little bit today about how you can tell your personal story for impact to help Let's Grow Kids in the childcare campaign right now in Vermont. Such an important time, and we're so glad you're here with us. So today, our learning objectives, the things that we hope that you get from this presentation are these. We hope that you know why personal stories are helpful in political movements. We hope that you'll be able to craft your own personal narrative at the end of this training. We hope that you'll feel confident telling your story. We hope that you'll be able to incorporate Let's Grow Kids talking points into your own story when you do tell it. We hope that you'll feel prepared to meet with your elected officials at the State House. We also hope that you're excited to tell your childcare story and to get in on this movement. So why tell a story? Why is this an important part of a political campaign? It's really interesting because even without the modern neurological research that proves that storytelling is the best way to capture people's attention, it's really the best way to bake information into their memories and to forge close personal bonds, even without that research that you can check out, humanity is always inherently known that people crave and seek out great stories. You can think about the stories that you tell your kids. You can think about the stories that you were told as a kid. Get that like sense of connection when we hear stories. People and brands and campaigns that tell the most compelling stories are the ones that command the most influence in their community. So that's what we're going for right now. We want to tell our story so that people will remember us. Stories help us remember. They help us remember messages. They help us empathize with each other. That's why we want to tell a story also, so we can feel the feelings. We know that you are struggling with childcare, and we want other people to feel that. So through a story is the best way to communicate. Stories give us context to understand experience and an opportunity to ask for change. We're going to talk a little bit about how a story that you might tell in a storytelling situation, or maybe to your kids or like a bedtime story, how that differs from the kinds of stories you might tell in this context, because we're going to tell a story so that people understand our experience and so that we can ask them to change it. I know this is a little bit of a weird thumbnail, but I'm going to play a bit of this video that sets up the context for why storytelling in political situations is so important and why it makes such a big impact. Give me just a minute to get this set up.
Well, here's the bottom line. People don't go to movies and they don't read a book unless there's a story. It's the same thing with campaigns. Successful campaigns tell a story. The stakes of telling a good story in politics are winning or losing. Good stories win. Campaigns without a story lose. Over the last 30 years, I've been the lead media strategist for hundreds of political campaigns for Democrats and Republicans, helping them communicate in a way that was persuasive. I spent a lot of time studying what voters are looking for, and the fundamental thing I've learned is that great storytelling is not about ideology. Great storytelling is great storytelling.
So it's a little bit about persuasion, and it's about great storytelling, right? We want to tell a really good story because political candidates that have stories and political campaigns that have stories, those are the successful ones. And right now, LGK has thrived because of your stories. We are a movement because of you, basically. Our narrative arc comes from individuals who believe in the childcare movement and who have a story of their own to add to it. So what's yours? That's what we're going to be asking you now. How has a lack of childcare impacted you? Just think about that for a moment. Is that where your story connects? Have you had to decide between working jobs or spending time with family? Have you had to make a decision because of childcare or a lack of childcare? Have you heard neighbors struggling or talking about how they have? Have you experienced this as an equity issue? Are you a business owner who hasn't been able to find people or employees because they lack childcare? What's your personal connection to the childcare movement? So when we're crafting our personal story, that's what we're thinking about. We're thinking about what is our personal connection to this movement. So some things to consider as you're talking about a personal story, and this is different than like if we were telling a fable or a myth or something like that. We're telling a personal story. What has happened to us that makes us connected to this movement that we want other people to hear about? So what are some of the things to consider in crafting a personal story? When you're thinking about those questions on that last slide, what's your connection, right? Here are the things to think about as you are considering that. First, make it personal. So tell us about your cred. Like, why are you coming to this movement? What is your personal investment? And that goes along with the stakes also. What do you have to lose if you don't have childcare, if you don't have employees with childcare? What are the stakes for you? Make that really real when you're telling your story. So how are you connected? That's how you make it personal. What do you have to lose? Or what's invested? Or what do you have to gain? Also, we could spin this in a positive way. And then what was the decision that you made? Is there a point? Is there a time that you had to make a decision, that you had to choose? What happened? Tell us that. That can be kind of the turning point in your story. So as we're considering this narrative that we're going to tell maybe to our friends and neighbors, maybe to our community, maybe to our legislators, think kind of in these steps. And then what do you want the audience to do? Here's our call to action, right? This is where this kind of storytelling, where political storytelling differs from any other kind of storytelling. We are going to ask for a very specific change. Let's Grow Kids has some talking points. We'll get to those later, where we ask legislators for exactly what we want. But we've been telling this story for over a decade, right? What do we want? We want affordable childcare for every family in Vermont. We want Vermonters to not pay more than 10% of their income for childcare. We want everyone to have equitable access, and we want childcare providers to be compensated. So those are the things that we want, and we ask for specific pieces of change to do that. Right now, as legislators have bills in front of them that they are considering, it's really important for us to ask for that change. So that should be in your story as well, maybe right at the very end. What goes at the beginning, though? We want a killer line, right? We want one sentence that's going to grab attention. And this takes a little bit of doing. Like, most storytellers don't just walk up to a microphone or walk up to a podium or walk up even to their legislator without having thought of their story yet. We want to put a little bit of craft in this, and here's the time to do it, right? We want a killer first line. Think about the first thing that you're going to say to that legislator. It might be that you introduce yourself first, and that you say your name first, but then how do you intro that story? How do you launch in to this personal story that is personal for you, that tells us the stakes, that includes a decision and an ask for change? How do you launch into that at the beginning? I want you to consider that as you're thinking about this. On this next slide, you're going to see a couple of different storytellers. These are all folks who have told stories for The Moth. Maybe you've heard about that. That's a really famous kind of personal storytelling series run by NPR, and that has kind of swept the nation. So people know a lot about personal storytelling through the lens of The Moth. And there are some really good reasons why that has taken over. People really connect to the way storytellers tell their own personal true stories. And I want to play some of these stories for you, because each one of these storytellers sort of exemplifies one of those tenets of personal storytelling, whether it's a killer first line, whether it's connection, their personal cred, whether it's kind of a reason for telling the story. Some of them break an expectation, but it's going to grab your attention. None of these stories are about childcare, so I'll remind you about that in a moment, but they kind of give you the sense of what a personal story feels like. or what it can feel like, and kind of what we want you to think about as you're crafting your story. Yours aren't for the stage. They're not necessarily to make people laugh. So you'll consider your audience as you're doing this. Some of these stories are meant to make people laugh, but they're also meant to make people feel things. And that's also what we want you to do. So let's listen to these three storytellers, and I'll kind of set it up for you a bit.
Growing up in Australia as a little Chinese boy in Canberra, my parents always told me that there were three things that I could be: a lawyer, a doctor, or a failure. But at 9 years old, a career path wasn't really what was top of my list. The top of my list of my things to do was the same thing that most other kids wanted. It didn't matter how old you were or what color your hair was or what culture you were from. The one thing that most kids wanted was to just be accepted by the other kids. Growing up in...
So I'll say that in his story, we hear a pretty killer first line, right? He tells us the three things that his parents said he could be, and one of them pretty humorous, and it breaks an expectation. We don't expect him to say a failure at the end. So that grabs our attention. And then he goes on to really make a point of connection. You and I we can all connect with wanting to be accepted as kids. So I don't know where the rest of his story goes, but I want to hear where the rest of his story goes. And that's essentially what we want to happen for you from your first line. So tell us your connection to the childcare movement. Tell us what has happened to you in that first line. Grab my attention and make me want to hear the rest of your story. Let's listen to another one.
I'm back from university and I've landed my first job, and it's actually my dream job. I'm working for the United Nations on a program on young people and HIV and AIDS. And so, of course, it's a pragmatic idealist dream come true, right? On the one hand, it's the UN, so it's like, love, peace, and happiness. And on the other hand, let's face it, the UN is like the world's biggest bureaucracy, right? So it's like rules and systems and procedures, and like I'm in heaven, right? Both at the same time in one place. So it's great. So I'm very happy. I'm also really excited because I get to throw myself into my new country and this new job all at the same time, because by this time it's clear to me that while my parents' generation, for them, the struggle was one to end white minority rule. For my generation, the struggle is going to be slightly different, right? I'm back from university.
So here we jump in to the middle of this person's story, right? And we hear a little bit about her cred. She's at the UN. And the interesting thing about this is that we all know the UN is idealism. It can change the world. And then also she experiences the rules and the bureaucracy. And some of us would hate that, but she loves it. So that is where she gets kind of her storytelling cred. And I want to hear the rest of her story. I want to know what happens to her at the UN. So catching that. I've got one more story to share with you.
I was in the third year of my engineering school in India. And one day a relation of mine who's been overseas came back with a Kit Kat, the candy bar, a full bar. He gave it to me and he said, "This is Kit Kat. They eat it in America. And it's amazing." So when you're in India and when you have a roommate, tradition dictates that you share this thing with your roommate. And I looked at it and it was like nothing I've ever seen before. It was beautiful. And I said, I'm going to eat just a small piece. I mean, I'll still share the bulk of the thing with a roommate. I mean, no harm done. I ate a small piece and it was amazing.
I'd imagine he probably eats the rest of the Kit Kat bar. That's how I think the story ends. But here is a moment from a storyteller where something happens, something really like specific happens. He acquires a Kit Kat bar, right? And sometimes I think about this, if we connect this back to what our childcare stories might be. If you've worked with kids, if you have kids, you have so many stories about the things that those kids have done. What are some touching things? What are some moments that we can all connect with? What is a part of your story? I taught for a long time. I taught kids, and one of the things that always comes to mind about kids is the way that they said my name. And I always start all of my stories about kids with that, because I have a one-syllable name. And so it's really easy to say my name a million times over and over again if you are not giving them attention. So I used to hear Finn, 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 Finn all the time. And that's usually the first line that I start with in a story, because it's attention grabbing. It certainly got my attention. But thinking about those moments in your own personal life, any experiences that you have, any time where an expectation was broken, anything that you want to share with us that is going to grab us by the heart, those are things that we want you to think about as you are crafting your story. And these were just some examples. Let's take it back to the childcare movement, though, shall we? So bringing it back to the issue at hand, connect your story to these core talking points. Remember, we want every child to have access to quality childcare. We want families to spend no more than 10% of their income on childcare. And early childcare educators are fairly compensated and supported. So those are our main talking points. And anywhere that your story can connect to those talking points, any access point that you have is the right one. If you can tell a story about it, we want to hear it. So right now, we're going to write our stories. We're going to take a moment to write an opening line, 3 or 4 sentences of your story, and maybe even you'll practice saying it aloud a little bit. Right here is where we're going to pause the video, and whoever is facilitating for you, or if you're at home alone watching this video, we want you to spend some time, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, thinking about how to write your story. So go ahead. I know it seems weird, but pause the video right now. Okay, so you're back. You've spent 5 or 10 minutes. You've written your killer first line. You've written a couple of sentences. Maybe in your Zoom room, you've even practiced saying them out loud to each other. Or maybe you have told your stories to your refrigerator. That's what I used to do when I was practicing stories. I'd stand in front of my refrigerator and tell my refrigerator my story. Sometimes I'd open the door, but that was usually distracting. But maybe you haven't practiced yet, or maybe you're feeling like really stuck. And that happens. So there's a technique in storytelling called spark storytelling, where we might use a word to spark a memory or to just get our juices flowing. And I wanted to give you a few of those. So if you're stuck and you want to think of something, here are some words that might unstick you. So the first word I thought of was sticky. So if you could think of a time where you were sticky, or a kid was sticky, or a situation was sticky, maybe just start writing about that. Don't worry about a first line. Don't worry about your sentences. Just start flowing with that. Maybe the word toddler brings a memory to mind. What do you know about toddlers? Maybe the word learning brings a memory to mind. When was a time that you learned something, or that you watched someone learn something new? Just start writing a story about that. How about the word activity? What's an activity that you enjoy? Tell me a story about that. How about need? When was a time that you had an unmet need? When was a time that you met the need of someone else? Can you tell me a story about that? How about action? That probably brings up a story, right? When's the last time you took an action? What was the biggest action that you took? What makes you move to take an action? Tell me a story about that. Maybe some of these things will bring up a story for you. And if you got stuck during the last slide and you need to pause the video again here and use some of these words to unstick or to be sticky and write your story, you can do that. Pause the video now if you need to. Otherwise, we are going to move on. So where are some places that you might tell your story? This is where you're going to think about your audience, right? We maybe in other contexts, we've heard the phrase code switch. That's where, like, if you're talking maybe to a friend, you use slightly different language than if you are talking to an authority figure, a government official or a teacher or someone older than you, or maybe someone younger than you even. We would code switch to consider our audience. And we're going to think about that as well, because there are some different places where you might tell your childcare story, and you'll want to think about your audience while you're crafting your story. So if you're telling your story at a community event or a gathering, that could look like a coffee hour at church. That might look like sitting around with your dance group afterwards or your community choir. That might look like any number of events that you go to that are in your community where you know people. You've got friends, you might have family gathered. How would you tell your story to those people? That might look a little bit different. Your first line might sound a little bit different. The angle might be a little different than if you were to tell your story to your friends or your neighbors, like just walking around. That might feel a little bit different. You might even knock on the door of a neighbor that you know is struggling with childcare and tell them your story and see if you can get them involved in the movement. If you were talking directly to your representatives, and we are going to dive into this in the following slides, but if you're talking directly to your representatives, your story is probably going to sound different than when you're talking to a friend or a neighbor or a family member at a community gathering. So think about that. If that is your audience, and you might think it's more formal, but it also just might need a little more context. So your representative might not know who you are, though in Vermont they might. So kind of depends on your audience. And we'll talk a lot more about this one specifically in just a moment. You might also submit your story as written testimony. There are times when Let's Grow Kids has asked for that from our supporters. So that might look a little bit different if it was written and was going directly to the State House. And in fact, we have had some opportunities to do that already this legislative session, and probably will have some more coming up. And you might even give live testimony at the Capitol. We just got done doing this, actually. So stay tuned for some more information on this, because it'll happen again during this legislative session. And that's an opportunity where you might even go up and testify at a podium in front of many representatives, but we'll get you more information on that if and when it happens. Up next, we've got Sam. He's going to talk about visiting the State House. Take it away, Sam. Sam, you're on mute.
Apologies. Sorry for that. This year, we have a really, really exciting opportunity in front of us. There are two childcare bills at the time of this recording, one in the House, which is Bill H-208, and one in the Senate, which is S-56. I'm sure you'll hear lots about them. And that means that we have the opportunity to meet with our elected officials face-to-face in the State House and advocate that we pass this bill, that we make changes to this bill, that we really address the childcare crisis. So most legislators, when they're in the State House, they are shaping policy based off what they're hearing from their constituents. So it's really, really important, and our legislators will want to hear from you about why childcare is important. They want to hear your experience about how this bill would affect your experience in the future. And they need to know what you want them to accomplish this session, which is why it's really important to advocate for the passage of the bill. And when visiting the State House, we'll focus on telling your story. So we'll communicate everything in the bullet before through a story, and really having a conversation about why passing the bill is so crucial this session. And the nice thing about this is that most often legislators will have time to meet with you over lunch. So you'll be sitting down at the table in a cafeteria, sharing some food, and it will be a very conversational setting for you to share your story and then make an ask of them. So as Finn walked you through before, this is a great time to think about your story and then write it down. We want to make sure that you're prepared when you go into this meeting with your legislator, and there's absolutely no harm in bringing that conversation written down so that you can share it and make sure that you're getting across your personal message. The second part of that is practice. Again, Finn laid out a great idea to give your speech, share your story with your refrigerator. I think I'm going to start doing that myself. It's good practice. So practice, practice, practice. Read it aloud. See the section that we have in the PowerPoint for things to keep in mind, like speaking slowly and clearly, and staying within the time limit. And ask questions. Finn and I are here as a resource. So if you want to practice your story to me, or if you want to share the written format and get some feedback on what you could change or include, that's what we're here for. And we're also here for support during that meeting, but I'll get into that in a little bit in the PowerPoint. So how should you structure your conversation with legislators? First and foremost, introduce yourself. As we mentioned before, your legislator may know you, they may not, they may be your neighbor, or they could be just another person in the community that you haven't met yet. So you're going to want to share about who you are, even if you do know them, share why you're there through that introduction. You know, what's your lived experience with this issue, and how does that connect to who you are as a person? So it's a great opportunity to set things up. You know, if you're an early childhood educator or just a parent, really anybody, just start with, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm a parent, I'm an early educator, and I'm here today to talk to you about childcare. That leads right into sharing why you're there. You know, we are really, really pushing people into the State House this year so that we can talk about the child care bill. And that's going to be the main reason why a lot of you come in to meet with your legislator is, I'm here to talk to you today about the child care bill that you're working on. And then that leads right into sharing why you care about passing that bill. You know, this is where the bulk of your personal story comes in. This is where you get to make it about how it would affect your life, or how it would have affected your experience with childcare, or maybe affects your the community experience with childcare. So we're going to jump right into, at that point, jump right into sharing why you care about passing that bill and how it will affect you. And then make an ask. This year, it's a simple one. We're asking every representative and every senator to pass the child care bill. You know, that ask may come in a different form, and we'll certainly help you structure that in the best way as the session changes and as the bill changes and moves through the House and the Senate. And depending on when it gets to the floor for a vote, or what the governor does after that, the ask could shift a little bit, but it's going to stay the same throughout the whole session, which is, please pass a child care bill. Please address the child care crisis. And then remember to say thank you. You know, the legislators are their main job is there to represent you and to listen to you, but we want to make sure that we keep an open dialogue, that they feel like this was a positive experience for them, because we're going to have lots of people coming into the State House to meet with legislators. Some will get many meetings, and we want to make sure that they have a good time each meeting, so that they're open to continuing to hear from us. All right, so you've decided to visit the State House this year to meet with your legislator. The first thing I'd recommend is that you arrive a few minutes early. It never hurts in case there are any last minute logistics. So we definitely don't want to be late. So we err on the side of caution, say arrive a few minutes early. You can park on State Street, you can park at our office, but I'll get into that in a moment. And I'll meet you at the State House personally. We can do a short little tour if we have time. I'll take you by the Cedar Creek room. I'll show you a few of our fabulous paintings that hang in the State House. And then we can get to the cafeteria and grab some lunch on Let's Grow Kids and sit down before your meeting. The second really important thing that I like to remember is that it's okay to bring written or prepared remarks to a meeting with their legislator. They're all totally used to it. They get PowerPoints every day in committee. They get submitted written testimony at different hearings. And witnesses and advocates all the time come to read off their statements rather than having everything memorized. So it's the norm to come with written remarks. But remember, it's just a conversation with a neighbor, essentially, is how we want to approach this. So It never hurts to have some thoughts written down, but you can approach it however it makes you feel comfortable. And you'll have plenty of time to speak with your legislator, but we want to make sure that they're conscious of their schedule. So their lunch hour usually ranges from 11:30 to 1. So we want to make sure that we wrap up before 1, so that they have time to get back to their committee or take care of any other business that they have. Some more tips. Do not make negative remarks about legislators or other community members who may disagree with you. We get it. This is a really sensitive topic, childcare, and there's a lot of emotional, personal experience that people have gone through in the state and in our communities. But we want to make sure that this is a moment of positivity. We're asking legislators to support or make changes to a bill, and we really, really need them on our side in this moment. So we're there to be positive. We're there to share a story, to make an ask, and we want to make sure we keep that conversation settled. As I mentioned before, we will help you park. We have a Montpelier office at 47 Court Street that is right next door to the State House. It literally could not be closer. And if that doesn't work out, or if the parking lot is full there, I'll help you find some space on State Street, which is usually has lots of spots open right in front of the State House. And they're 2-hour spaces, so we can help you cover that cost. And we will cover all your expenses, as I just said, for gas, for lunch, parking at the State House. Since we know it might not be always the most convenient trip to make over to Montpelier, we want to make it as easy as possible. So let us know how we can help make that trip easier for you, and we'll do it. And I'll kick it back over to Finn.
Yeah, so just focusing back in on our talking points right now. So when you're thinking about your story, as you are connecting your personal experience, as you're telling us your cred, your stakes, as you're leading with your attention-grabbing first line, we want you to make sure that you are focusing, though, on this problem. We know that the childcare system in Vermont and in the US is broken. We know that 3 out of 5 of Vermont's youngest children don't have access to the care they need. We know that employers can't fill positions because parents can't work. We know that parents who do have care can't afford it. And we know that early child care educators are not compensated well enough. So this is the problem. And if you say one thing to your legislator, if all of your personal story falls out of your head, if everything else goes away, focus on this issue, because we know this is what we are trying to fix, and we can do it this year with your help and your story. Here's the solution, though. This bill, it's not perfect, but we're going to get it perfect. And right now, first time in Vermont's history, we have everything we need in place to make a long-term public investment in childcare, to fix this problem, support our families. So don't miss this opportunity. Will you please join us? And if you want some more information, if you want those talking points right there at your fingertips as you are writing the story, you can head to this website right here, letsgrowkids.org. And if you put the /transform in, you'll get these talking points and everything else that is coming up for this biennium, for this legislative session. So go ahead and check out that website. I'll also show you this one. We've got some upcoming actions that we want you to know about. We're so excited about the Courage to Care rally. That'll be on April 12th, 2023, 1 p.m. at the Vermont State House. We are organizing buses. We are organizing people coming from the entire state. So keep an eye out for some information about that. And if you're not signed up yet, go ahead and get signed up. You can also, I'll show you how to get signed up here in just a minute, but we've got local action team meetings that are coming up in support of that rally and in support of all of the legislative action that we are taking this session. So keep an eye out for that. There are local action teams in Chittenden County and Addison County. There are action teams in Bennington, Windham, Windsor County, all over the state. So no matter where you are, you can join an action team either virtually or in person. And the place to find out all of the information about these things is on our Mobilize site. So www.mobilize.us/VT childcare campaign. You can even just search for Let's Grow Kids in Mobilize. So go ahead and head over there. Every event that we have coming up, every opportunity for you to get involved is listed there. If you want to right now point your phone or some device of choice at this QR code, you will find a way to register for the child care rally right now. And that's the action we want you to take immediately, right here. Come and join us on April 12th. If you can't be there in person, get your friends to come up. make sure and stay informed. Even if you can't be there, go ahead and sign up for it so that you get some of those updates so you know what's coming up. It's going to be a real scene. It's going to be a good time. There'll be playlists, so many storytellers, so much fun, all sorts of folks coming, and please join us. Always good to end with a thank you, right, Sam?
Yes. So thank you all, and we hope to see you in the State House and at the rally on April 12th.
Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for being a part of this movement. We'll see you soon.